Welcome to another episode of Liberty Dad Podcast, a discussion on politics and culture. If you're tuning in live, then I especially thank you for giving me your time so early. So let's talk about what we're gonna. Sorry, folks, about that. A little bit of fumbling there with the script I had. So anyway, a while back, I asked followers on Twitter what sort of topics that they would like me to cover. And here is one response that I received. Raising kids, and I'm quoting here, raising kids during this so-called cultural war and how to avoid one's children from being stuck following people who exhibit red flags. For example, preventing your kid from taking advice from an Andrew Tate type figure. Well, Rob, and that's who it came from. That is a great topic. And today I will discuss just that. All right. Got past that little fumbling of an intro, no big deal there. So I saw a video yesterday. It was kind of floating around on Twitter. It's from a fellow named Sneako. Now, I'm not terribly familiar with Sneako, but we're going to go ahead and play that video. You may have already seen it, but I'm going to play this video, and I will point out that the video does have some inappropriate language. It's not very long, and it's not too terribly wild, so it's keeping within reasonable boundaries of the Liberty Dad podcast. But I do want to play this video so that you understand what's out there today, and then what kind of motivated me to get on top of this particular request. So let's go ahead and get that played out, get that playing out, or get that started.
Andrew Tates. Fuck the woman. Fuck the woman.
What? No, wait. We love women. We love women. We love women.
But not like transgenders.
Yes, sir. We love everybody.
Okay.
No.
Okay,
Yeah,
goodbye.
yeah, Mark, preach. What have I done?
Fucking talk.
Yeah. Talk to him.
Yo, what's up?
All right. So interesting video indeed. So this I did a little bit of research on Sneako, and apparently he's part of like this red-pilled manosphere crowd. And I think these are the gentlemen that get out there. Maybe gentlemen's a little too nice, but these are the guys that are out there and they're kind of talking about this masculinity in, a very unsavory way. And anybody that follows me on Twitter, they know that in response to anything on Andrew Tate, one of my favorite sayings is to say that Tate is trash. And I will stand behind that. Now, when I was doing some research on this, the reactions to this video, they didn't really seem that surprised that he would have fans that would say these kind of things. So this leads me to believe that some of the things that he says are in line with what these young fans have expressed when they got to finally meet him. And I did see exactly one video, and it wasn't even a full video. I just kind of, if I saw something, I clicked on it and I watched for, I don't know, maybe 30, 45 seconds, something like that. And he's on a podcast with some other people, and he's discussing some weird swinger experience that he had with his girlfriend and how he didn't like it. And whatever. And apparently he has an open relationship. So I watched about 30 or 40 seconds of that. And then I was like, okay, good enough, I guess. But mostly what I'm going on is what I saw in the video, and then what I saw from people who apparently are more familiar with him and how they responded. Because a lot of people responded in this way where they didn't really seem surprised again. So I was like, all right, well, this seems to be kind of who he is. So this kind of raises the question now, how do we raise kids in the culture war? How do we prevent them from the influence of the Sneakos and the Andrew Tates of the world? Now, before I get into that, I do want to kind of read something that he happened to say. So on Twitter, I did come across him and he's responding to this video. So here's what he says. I'm not going to pull it up on the screen. I'm just going to read it to you. He said, "They are children and obviously joking. This is how I was at 12. But if it sounds egregious to you, blame the rainbow flags in their classrooms, blame the media for emasculating men. It's your fault for forcing an obvious agenda, not these kids. Boys will be boys." And then I responded, and I just kind of made a retweet of that or requote, if you will. And I said, yes, boys will be boys and men should be men by teaching boys to be men proper. And it starts with accountability. What a shame. That's all I said. And I stand by that. The fact of the matter is that, yes, in a sense, he is correct. They are children. They are probably joking, or maybe they're not. Maybe they really believe it. It's hard to tell because many of us, when we were 12 or 13, somewhere in that age, we expressed ideas like that because we were foolish and young and we didn't know any better. And this is why we have parents. And this is why it's a good idea for, like I said, men to be men and teach young boys to be men proper. Now, I'm not a fan of him dismissing any responsibility, but to be honest, this is not a new problem. This is a problem that has existed for many, many years. It existed when I was younger, and it existed when my dad was younger, and probably even going back further. Anybody that's my age might remember the 1980s where they had, all the rock bands and there were all these, that's when we started getting parental warnings on the warning labels on albums, and so there was a lot of, there's always been this culture war. And before that, it was Elvis and he was going to ruin all the kids, so on and so forth. Now, let's get back to that question. How do we raise kids in a culture war? Well, it turns out that the 1980s have something to teach us. You might remember if you're old enough, and if you're not, that's okay. There was an organization called the Parents Music Resource Center. It was led by 4 women. It was called the PMRC. And these 4 women were known as the Washington Wives. And that's because all of their husbands had some level of government connection. The most famous being Tipper Gore, whose husband Al Gore was a senator at the time. So this culminated in a Senate hearing where the Senate brought in Dee Snider of Twisted Sister and others who were musicians at the time. And the issue here was about the graphical the graphic images that were on album covers and then some of the graphic lyrics that were in some of the music that was out there. So what I want to do is I want to play a couple clips from that. It's actually one clip. And what I did was I found a couple interesting points where Dee Snider is talking and he is telling us effectively exactly how do we raise kids in the culture war? And when I say culture war, for all intents and purposes, let's say it's from any influences that we may consider to be negative. So it doesn't matter whether it's rock music or any kind of music for that matter. It doesn't matter whether it's an influencer who maybe your kids ought not be listening to, or maybe nobody should be listening to. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter whether it's the so-called woke crowd, the rainbows, as Sneako put it. He said, blame the rainbow flags in their classrooms and the media for emasculating men. Look, at the end of the day, I think that Dee's answer here tells us exactly what we need to know about how to raise kids in the culture war. And then after that, I'm going to give you some of my own advice. Okay. So let's go ahead and get that clip played. So I'm going to put that back up on the screen. All right. There we've got D. And then let's listen in. It's about 1 minute and 30 seconds here.
There happens to be one area where I'm in complete agreement with the PMRC, as well as the National PTA and probably most of the parents on this committee. That is, it is my job as a parent to monitor what my children see, hear, and read during their preteen years. The full responsibility for this falls on the shoulders of my wife and I because there is no one else capable of making these judgments for us. Parents can thank the PMRC for reminding them that there is no substitute for parental guidance, but that is where the PMRC's job ends.
So the choice the parent has then is to sit down and listen to every song on the album, right?
Or read the lyrics if they're on the record.
What if they're not on the, I mean, I think there's pretty general agreement that if the lyrics are printed, that's one possible solution for this. Let's suppose the lyrics aren't printed. Then what choice does a parent have? To sit down and listen to every song on the album?
Well, if they're really concerned about it, I think that they have to.
Do you think that's reasonable to expect parents to do that?
Being a parent isn't a reasonable thing. It's a very hard thing. I'm a parent and I know. Okay, I'm a new parent. I only have one child maybe, but I'm learning that there's a lot to being a parent that you didn't expect. It's not just, oh, isn't baby cute? There's a lot of labor, a lot of time, and a lot of effort that goes into it. It's not totally pleasurable.
All right. And Dee is absolutely correct. And it may not be something that parents generally like to say, like, hey, it's not always pleasurable, but it's not. You know, any parent, like I'm a parent, my son is 4. And there were times where the moments where it just wasn't pleasurable. Maybe he was crying and I couldn't figure out what was going on. Maybe we had, some soiled diapers that we had to take care of. And as he gets older, those kind of unpleasant experiences will change. There will be times where I will be frustrated. And this goes along with the idea of the culture war. It's not pleasant to have to deal with the culture war, but I think that Dee nails it when he says, like, look, it is your job and it's a hard job. And if you really want to keep your kids from certain things, then it's your job to get in there and know exactly what they are doing. So 3 things that I have, and anybody that knows me knows that I love things in threes. I just think it makes it easier to remember. So my advice is going to fall on three areas: be present, be approachable, and be vigilant. I think when you do these 3 things, you're going to find that at the end of the day, you're going to find, I think, that your experience as a parent is going to be better. And in the long term, I think you're going to actually enjoy the results. So let's go ahead and talk about these 3 things. All right. So be present. I think that one's a simple one. Effectively spend time with them. Know who your children are, right? Like right now, I'm doing a podcast and you might be able to hear that my son is in the room with me. In fact, yesterday morning, he was in the room and even popped up on screen. I spend as much time as I can with him. Now, I work from home, so it makes it a little bit easier to spend a lot of time. However, if you don't work from home, then you have to be present as much as you can be. Now, why do I say be present? Because now let me back up a little bit here because I want to point out my son is 4 and I have 1. So I'm kind of in the same position that Dee is when he said, hey, I've got 1, I'm a new parent. I'm kind of staying in that same boat. So my perspective here is really an observation of the world around me and what I've seen over 45 years. So being present is one of those things that children can rely on. They can rely on, hey, when it's time for mom or dad to be at the soccer game, they tend to be there. Or maybe if they can't be at the soccer game, they're at least present when I come home from school, or they're present when I show them this thing that I made at school, like, hey mom, hey dad, look. And sometimes when my son comes home, he's like, look at this drawing that I made. And we're like, wow, that's a really neat drawing. Tell us about the drawing. We are present. We show him that we want to spend as much time as we can with him. And as a parent, you will find that your time varies from other parents, and that's okay. I think the core issue that you need to focus on is making sure that all of these 3 things are consistent over the life of your child. So being present, I think, is just the number one thing that you can do. However, we do have the next one, which is be approachable. Okay, so being approachable. I've heard a lot of people say growing up that, children need to have the fear of God, from their parents. And, I don't know that I entirely agree, but I don't know that I entirely disagree either. I think that when it comes to major things, your child probably should be like, all right, I don't want to do this because dad will be very, very angry. On the other hand, I don't think that children should walk around feeling that every move they're going to make, they should be afraid. For example, the other day, our son is learning to be potty trained overnight. So the other day, he comes in, he was a little hesitant. He was like, "Well, Dad, oh yeah," I'm like, "I peed the bed." I didn't freak out. I was like, "Oh, okay. Well, let's take care of that. Let's go in, let's change the sheets because it happens." Right. So I think that part of being approachable is that pardon me, folks here. Part of being approachable means that we are determining when they need to be afraid and when they don't. Right? Now, again, I don't think that being afraid is the priority. I think being approachable is the priority with the understanding that, hey, if it's pretty bad, if it's pretty egregious, I'm going to get in trouble. If dad finds out that I pulled my sister's hair, he's going to be pretty angry. But if dad finds out that I drew on the walls, eh, he's not going to be angry. He's still going to be relatively approachable, and I feel comfortable knowing that I can come to him. Because here's my thing: when it's a good thing, it's easy to be approachable, but when it's a bad thing, it's harder to be approachable. And I think that when a child experiences more approachability from their parents, then that conditions them, in a sense, to always be ready to come and approach you. And they need to be able to come and tell you when something has happened, because otherwise they will start hiding stuff from you. I've seen a meme going around, or maybe it's not a meme, maybe it's more like some Twitter comments, and it's regarding the whole trans issue. And one of the things that a lot of pro trans folks will say is that, hey, if your child isn't comfortable telling you that they're trans, that it's a you problem, that you are failing as a parent. And I actually disagree with that, because I think there's always going to be something that your child will hide from you. When I was younger, trans really wasn't an issue, but going to school, say, wearing your favorite rock band t-shirt that your parents wouldn't approve of because of the design that might have been on there, or because they might start questioning, like, who is that band and what are they singing about, right? That was something that many of the guys had. Many of the girls wanted to wear something that was a little bit more provocative than their parents would approve of, so they might go to school. So there's always going to be something that your child is going to hide from you. I don't think that you can escape it, but I do think that you can minimize it so that they're not hiding everything, so that they feel comfortable coming and telling you, like, hey, this thing happened. Okay. So that leads us to the third thing, which is being vigilant. All right. Now, this one I break down into two segments, two like sub points. Well, that's number one, know what they are doing, and number two, defend your children. So let me give you two stories to illustrate this, because I think, and these are true stories. Like every story that you ever hear from me is going to be a true story. So number one, on knowing what they are doing, it was very common that I would, as a teenager, I would say, "Hey, mom, I'm going to go to the park." I go to the park with my friends, be playing at the park, and then I would look over and I would just happen to see my mom drive by. Like, wow, wonder where. And at the time, I was like, oh, I wonder where my mom is going. Well, it turns out as I got older, I found out that she was checking up on me. Or, another one, I would go to a friend's house and then she would call them up on the phone, and she would talk to their parents, and she would say, all right. So, who are you? Who's going to be home? Is it both mom and dad? Are there guns in the house? Where are they going to be playing? Are they going to be outside? Are you going to be watching them? What are they going to be listening to? What are they like? She would just like interrogate other parents, to the point that as a child, I was quite embarrassed. Okay. And I was like, oh, I was groaning. I was like, Mom, stop asking all those crazy questions. But what she was doing was being vigilant and making sure that she knew that what I was up to. And then the counterbalance to that, because I think that the reason I made two sub points on being vigilant is because I think both of these balance each other out over time. The second one is defend your children. So let me give you a very interesting story. Now, when I was in ninth grade, I went to a public high school in Dayton, Ohio. And I was not a particularly good student. In fact, I was the class clown and I was constantly getting in trouble and really, really mouthy. I mean, if you guys think that I say crazy things now, you should have seen me when I was younger. Well, at any rate, since I wasn't always good about doing my homework, one time I actually did my homework and I turned it in on white paper. Okay. Now this, no, I'm sorry. It was recycled paper. I turned it in on recycled paper. And the teacher rejected it. And she rejected it on the grounds that it was on recycled paper and she wanted it on white paper. And I came home and I told my mom, I was like, Mom, I was like, the teacher turned down my work. And she was like, what? And so I told her what happened. She got mad. She called up the school and she yelled at them. And she said, look, my son barely does his homework as it is. And then when he turns it in, you're going to turn it down because it's on recycled paper and not on white paper. And then she went further and she said, and furthermore, all you do is preach about using recycled paper. So which is it? Is it recycled paper or is it white paper? So the end result of that was that she got pissed and she had me removed from that particular teacher and moved to another teacher, which, by the way, actually I enjoyed a whole lot better. She was a much better teacher. This is part of defending your children. You've got to stick up for them when they need it. Another good example, and this one's a little on the embarrassing side, but I'm going to tell you because I like to have as much transparency as possible here. I'm going to kind of spill the beans on a story that happened to me when I was about 15. I told you I was I 15, maybe 16. I don't remember. But at any rate, no, I was younger. I was younger because this was in junior high. So in junior high, I was again mouthy and I mouthed off to a kid and he said, you know what? I want to fight you. And I was like, okay, whatever. And so it was common at that time that it was a Catholic middle school. And it was very common that all the students would meet somewhere. There were two different locations, and one of them was at a park, a local park. In fact, it was the same park that I'd mentioned a moment ago that I would sometimes go and play at, and my mom would check up on me. So we met at the park, and I was kind of making fun of him. I didn't really take it serious. He pushed me. I pushed him. I think he pushed me again. I tripped over something and I fell back. And then he just took that advantage and started wailing on me and started kicking me in the ribs repeatedly, like a lot. And then he gave one final kick, reminded me of the name that I called him, which was a very unsavory name. He reminded me of that, kicked me one last time, said, this is for such and such name, and then kicked me, blam. There I am. Now I got beat up. I'm crying. I take my, I pick my little sobbing self up and I walk home. I'm crying. My mom comes out and she's like, what in the world happened? I'm like, and the kid lived like down the block. And he wouldn't live very far away. So I told her what happened. I was like, yeah, I got in a fight. And I was like, I lost. No, it was clear I was lost, because I clearly I didn't come home as a champion. So I lost and she stuck up for me. So she went down the street, met this kid. He happened to be sitting outside, stood up and she yelled at him. Now, I don't know what she said because I was at home, but I know that she went down and she defended my lack of honor because I clearly lost and I had no honor at that point. And I actually kind of deserved it anyway. But she went and she defended me, right? And so this is what parents do. They defend their kids. They know what they are doing. Those two things, they balance out, and that's what makes you the vigilant parent. Today, my kid doesn't really need a whole lot of defending just yet, but I'm prepared to do so. But I do know what he's doing. Sometimes he'll ask for my tablet and he'll say, Dad, can I watch TV? He wants to watch YouTube, like Paw Patrol and some other things. And I'm like, sure. So I give him the tablet. Now, when I give him the tablet, he has free reign to choose. Okay. But I always look over to see what he's watching. I always just check in. I'll come in. Or if he's watching on the television, I'll come in periodically and I'll say, what are you watching? I'll literally say that. I'll come in, I'll say, what are you watching? He'll say, well, I'm watching this. Okay, just checking on you. And I am vigilant about what he's up to, what he is consuming. Because like Dee Snider said in the clip earlier, it is up to you. It is the parent's job, and there is no substitute. Because at the end of the day, the responsibility falls on the shoulders of the parents and no one else. So, wrapping things up, I want you to remain present, be approachable, and be vigilant. These, I believe, simple enough, but it's going to take a lot of work. And I believe that they will give you the best outcome. There are never any guarantees, but again, I think this gives you the best outcome. And this is how a parent can fight against the woke culture, rock musicians, whatever, or whatever social media influencer has captured their attention. Because at the end of the day, it would be nice if people like Sneako and musicians and all these other people would consider all of our kids when they're putting together media. But the reality is they're not going to. The reality is that 13-year-old boys are going to be drawn to crazy things that we're not approving of. So therefore, it's our job to remain vigilant, to be approachable, be present, be a parent. All right. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. I want you to be sure to catch me every morning, Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, nice early, for an informed discussion on politics and culture. And at Sundays at 7 p.m. with my co-host, Susan Hogarth, to discuss LP happenings. What we're doing on that show is just going out and finding out what's going on in the LP world with the Libertarian Party. And it doesn't matter whether it's a state or local or maybe even national. What we're trying to do is find what's going on so that we can highlight these events and let other people know what's happening and maybe spread some of these ideas around. And I want you to be sure to do all the proper audience actions. Subscribe to my YouTube channel over at youtube.libertydad.com. Ring that bell, like videos, drop me a word or two in the comment section. If you want to follow me on social media, you can do so at Liberty Dad on Facebook, Liberty Dad Pod on Twitter, known now as X, or email go old fashioned libertydadpodcast@gmail.com, because I would love to hear from you. Lastly, remember, if you're a champion of liberty, your product is people, or your business is people, and your product is liberty. I want you to have a great week. Catch you tomorrow, and I'm out.